From interspecies romances to dark comedies about imaginary Nazi friends, filmmakers have been adapting from other sources since the dawn of the industry. Some have become classics in their own right.
Choose life, choose a job, choose a career, choose a family.
But there's one type of adaptation that carries with it the stench of disappointment for moviegoers everywhere. The live-action Hollywood anime adaptation. And for good reason. The selection to date ranges from creatively bankrupt pieces of hot garbage to trippy experiments that can at best be described as interesting. Some would argue that the challenges of adapting something not only from a different medium, but a different culture, are a recipe for failure, and we should just leave anime alone. But adaptations and remakes aren't going anywhere. And here's the thing, they don't have to be bad. The process of adapting anything for the big screen is going to present challenges, but it also presents opportunities. If we look at the 3 common pitfalls that plague most anime adaptations, and the exceptionally rare examples that overcome them, it is possible to imagine a future where they don't mostly suck. Lesson number 1. Understand what makes the source material special. Anime and manga are visual mediums, so of course a key aspect of their appeal is the visual style. But it's not enough to draw on visual references alone, and a lot of Hollywood adaptations make the mistake of relying on brand recognition without focusing enough on what draws people to them in the first place. The story. Slapping an orange suit on a Canadian dude in the middle of an American high school action mystery sci-fi plot didn't work for Dragon Ball Evolution. It's not Dragon Ball Z without the inner conflict, intense rivalries, and detailed lore. The same goes for Ghost in the Shell, which originated as a manga that was adapted into an anime film in 1995. The 2017 live-action adaptation references this film visually, but it tries to combine 2 different stories from the Ghost in the Shell franchise. It's a whole new identity search subplot, and in doing so, it fails to tell any coherent story at all, and ends up being a confusing, dull mess. I'm not saying that adaptations have to be faithful to the original text. Creative license should be given to those who adapt works of art, and is actually necessary when adapting for a different medium. But at the very least, an understanding of what makes the original special is crucial when adapting anything. Live-action adaptations are more common in Japan, and although the quality varies, there's one that stands out. Rurouni Kenshin Origins is a rare example of a live-action adaptation that balances brand recognition with creative license. The source material is a manga, which was adapted into a hugely successful anime in the late 90s. In each adaptation, the core of the story remains the same. Former samurai Homura Kenshin wanders the countryside trying to atone for his violent past, while navigating a new era which will eventually see the disappearance of the samurai warrior class. The film takes on a darker tone, and while it retains some characteristics of the anime, like Kenshin's catchphrase and distinctive facial scar, it doesn't rely on them to draw the viewer's attention. Instead, it focuses on the core themes of the story: redemption, reckoning with the past, and new beginnings. By focusing on what makes Rurouni Kenshin special, the film achieves something that few Hollywood adaptations can manage. It tells a coherent story, and it works as an entertaining standalone film. Lesson number 2. Pick a property that's right for adaptation. There are 2 key differences between anime and live-action feature films. The first is that right off the bat, we have a greater suspension of disbelief when we watch animation. We understand that what we're seeing isn't physically possible, but it doesn't matter because animated worlds aren't beholden to the same rules as the physical world. The stories told through anime and manga are built within this world and are therefore better served by its conventions. Anime is also often serialized, which means that it has the time to develop character arcs and do the world building that a 2 or 3 hour feature film just doesn't. Some stories don't translate well to live action, or they don't make sense when distilled for the runtime of a feature film. This is why it's important to choose a property that can work within these constraints, like
I wanna be the very very best.
Pokemon is almost tailor-made for adaptation. A multimedia franchise that started as a game which spawned a hit anime series, films, comics, music, merchandise, a theme park, and trading cards. The franchise has been adapted for different modes of consumption since its inception. The concept for Pokemon stems from creator Satoshi Tajiri's childhood hobby of insect collection, so it has grounding in real life, which makes it easier to adapt to live action. Feature films don't have the time to do the world building that a long-running series does, but Pokemon is set in a world which already closely resembles our own, so the leap from the games and anime doesn't require too much explanation or challenge our suspension of disbelief. Like Rurouni Kenshin Origins, the film focuses on what makes the franchise special. It doesn't fall over itself trying to cram in extra plot or expand the mythology because that's never been the core draw of the franchise. At the risk of stating the obvious, the draw is the Pokemon. By selecting a franchise that lends itself to adaptation and understanding what drew audiences to it in the first place, the filmmakers have made a film that not only satisfies fans of the anime, but works as a standalone film.
Yeah, nice work, kid. Maybe there's a little detective in you after all.
And that brings us to lesson 3. Adaptations don't have to be faithful. When you take a story off the page or off the small screen, it becomes a standalone product that needs to work on its own merits. Changes are necessary to make it work for its new time constraints, language, and physical setting. But those changes have to be meaningful, not simply made for convenience or to shoehorn as much plot and brand recognition as possible. In book-to-film adaptations, this often means omitting storylines, changing character motivations, and condensing timelines. A lot of anime adaptations struggle with this. They don't seem to know what to keep, what to let go of, and what to change. This is one of the many problems in Netflix's adaptation of Death Note. Death Note is an adaptation of a 2006 anime of the same name. Originally set in Japan, it's about a teenager named Light Yagami who comes across a notebook which gives him the power to kill anyone simply by writing their name in the book and imagining their face. He decides to use his power to kill criminals, and when the public get wind of this, they nickname the mysterious vigilante Kira, based on the Japanese transliteration of the English word killer. Netflix's 2017 adaptation changes the setting from Tokyo to Seattle, but it keeps the nickname Kira, and this is how they try to explain it.
It also sort of means killer in Japanese, so if they're going to be looking for him, it's going to be on the wrong continent.
This rationale makes no sense because the origin of the nickname Kira is specifically tied to the story's original setting, so changing the setting really means that the nickname needed to change. But the film wants to have its cake and eat it too, so they opted to change the setting but ignore the implications this has for the rest of the story, and the result is this and other clunky pieces of exposition. I'll say it again. Changes are necessary, but they have to serve a purpose. A better example of how changes can be made effectively is in Elita Battle Angel. Set in a cyberpunk post-apocalyptic future, Elita follows a cyborg who's rescued from a scrap heap by a cyber physician named Dr. Ido. She has no memory of her previous life, but fragments of her past gradually re-emerge as she navigates her new life. It's based on a manga which was adapted into 2 original video animations in 1993. The 2019 adaptation takes elements from both sources, matching the story beats of the anime pretty closely, but there are key changes to the characters' relationship dynamics, which give the film an emotional center not present in the anime. For example, in the manga, Elita is named after Dr. Ido's cat, while the anime doesn't delve into the origins of her name at all. In the live-action film, she's named after his daughter, who was killed by one of his cyborg patients. Right away, this gives the relationship a protective tone that goes on to inform the dynamic throughout the film and provides it with its emotional center.
Thank you, Father.
Another key change is the way the live-action film addresses Elita's mysterious past. In the anime, she doesn't reflect much on her past. In the live-action, Elita's interest in her past is used as a device to progress the story and develop her character. These changes work only because they serve a purpose in the story, as well as building an emotional engagement. Ghost in the Shell adds a similar identity search subplot in the live action.
Your shell belongs to them, but not your ghost. Your ghost is yours.
But it doesn't work because the rest of the film is trying to tell a story about cyber terrorism, and the amnesia identity search plot feels like a loose thread. So where in Elita, the subplot feels appropriate and purposeful. In Ghost in the Shell, it feels like a failed attempt to elicit empathy, and if you're cynical, an excuse to cram in more plot and set up sequels. Adapting serialized anime and manga for a mainstream film-going audience is hard. Anime adaptations are actually a relatively new phenomena compared to, say, book adaptations, and it's going to take time before Hollywood figures out the do's and don'ts. The adaptations that have worked all have three things in common. They honed in on what made the original special, were based on properties that lent themselves to adaptation, and made changes that were meaningful. Of course, there are other factors to consider, like budgets and Hollywood studios' aversion to taking risks. Studios want to appeal to as broad an audience as possible, and this usually results in films being watered down to be as bland and commercially friendly as possible. But these recent adaptations are a step in the right direction, and they give me hope that maybe, just maybe, we can look forward to a brighter future for anime adaptations.